They came home quieter than they'd left, leaner too, shoulders carrying something heavier than a kit bag. But the men who returned from the Western Front between 1918 and 1919 brought something else with them that nobody talks about, a masterclass in surviving impossible terrain. Mud had been their enemy, their classroom, and ultimately their greatest teacher. And when flooded family farms threatened to undo everything their families had worked for, these veterans reached back into the darkest corners of their wartime experience and pulled out something extraordinary. To understand what these men brought home, you first have to understand what the Western Front actually felt like at ground level. Forget the clean diagrams in history textbooks. The reality of a trench system, particularly in the low-lying clay plains of Belgium and northern France, was an unrelenting war against water as much as against the enemy. The ground beneath Passchendaele and the Ypres salient sat just meters above the water table. Every shell crater immediately filled. Every newly dug trench became a channel. Rain didn't drain, it accumulated, pooled, and swallowed men whole. Soldiers learned, out of raw necessity, to read the land the way a bushcrafter reads a forest. They observed how water moved across a slope, where it collected, and, crucially, where it could be redirected. Engineers and infantrymen alike dug sump pits, small, deep collection holes positioned at the lowest point of a trench section, then cut shallow channels leading toward them, coaxing standing water away from living and working spaces. It wasn't elegant. It was survival geometry, learned under fire. When these men were handed soldier settlement land grants in places like the Canterbury Plains, the Waikato lowlands, or the marshy river flats of rural Victoria and Saskatchewan, many received parcels that polite society would have called, well, challenging, waterlogged, seasonally flooded, the kind of land that broke farmers who hadn't spent 4 years mastering saturated terrain. But the veterans saw something different. They saw a problem they had already solved. Drawing directly from their experience managing trench water systems, many began excavating networks of open drainage channels across their paddocks, cutting along natural contour lines to intercept surface runoff before it could pool. They positioned these channels the same way they had positioned communication trenches, not in straight lines, but following the logic of the landscape, moving water gradually toward lower ground or into existing watercourses. The work was brutally physical, but these were men for whom brutal physical work under difficult conditions was simply Tuesday. What separated veterans who succeeded in land reclamation from those who struggled wasn't equipment. Most had almost none. It was the disciplined, methodical approach to maintenance that military life had drilled into them. Trench systems on the Western Front collapsed the moment maintenance stopped. A blocked sump, an uncleared channel, a neglected drainage cut could flood an entire section within hours. Veterans understood viscerally that drainage infrastructure demanded constant attention, and they applied that same vigilance to their farmland through every wet season. They also improvised with remarkable creativity. Timber salvaged from fencing and fallen structures was laid across the soggiest sections of paddock, echoing the duckboard platforms they had once laid across trench floors to keep men's feet above the waterline. Some veterans dug deeper channels and backfilled them with layered organic material, brush, straw, and broken sod, creating rudimentary rubble drains that allowed water to percolate downward rather than sit on the surface. It wasn't modern agricultural engineering, but it worked. And it worked because it came from a place of hard-won, embodied knowledge. There's something quietly profound about a man who survived one of history's most devastating conflicts, returned to a waterlogged patch of earth, and chose to build rather than surrender. These veterans didn't wait for better tools, better conditions, or better luck. They assessed the problem with the eyes of men who had already solved harder ones, and they went to work. That instinct, to observe carefully, adapt intelligently, and commit fully, is the beating heart of every fieldcraft tradition worth studying. Whether you're managing your own land, building resilience in an uncertain world, or simply trying to understand the deep well of human ingenuity under pressure, the men who came home from the trenches have something to teach you. The mud they mastered wasn't so different from the challenges any of us face. The question is whether we're willing to learn from it. If this episode brought history to life for you, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with someone who believes that the best survival lessons come not from gear lists, but from the people who had no choice but to figure it out. New episodes drop every week. We'll see you in the field.